In the early 1860s, Oxford ran on routines, and one of them belonged to a young mathematics lecturer named Charles Lutwidge Dodgson. He worked within the university world, but he also carried a quieter second life. He took photographs, kept careful records, and moved between formal duties and private hobbies. That mix mattered. It gave him a reason to seek out families, not just colleagues, and it brought him into the orbit of one household in particular. The household belonged to the Liddells. The father held a senior position at the college, and the family became part of the circle Dodgson saw regularly. What began as a polite connection deepened into a steady familiarity shaped by visits, outings, and the kind of attention adults sometimes gave to bright children. Among the Liddell daughters, one stood out in Dodgson's life, Alice. Time with her did not produce a book yet, but it formed a bond that made invention feel natural. Dodgson already enjoyed puzzles, wordplay, and games that turned everyday logic upside down. With the Liddell children, those habits found a willing audience, and he practiced entertaining as much as teaching. The important point came here. Nothing existed on paper, and no one planned a classic. There was only a friendship and a pattern of moments that invited improvisation. It laid the groundwork for a story that still had not been told but now had the right listener. On the 4th of July 1862, Dodgson set out on the Thames with the three Liddell sisters. It sounded like a simple outing, the kind that usually ended with everyone returning home and forgetting the small details. But the day kept asking something from him. Keep them interested, keep them laughing, keep the time moving. So he reached for what he already used in moments like this, an invented tale made up in real time. As the boat carried them along, he pushed the story further than a quick joke or a short anecdote. He led it downward into an underground adventure where one strange event opened the door to the next. The children's attention became the engine. Each reaction invited another turn. He adjusted, expanded, and connected ideas on the spot, building a chain from nothing but the need to entertain them. By the end of that trip, something new existed that had not existed the day before. A spoken narrative with a shape, a direction, and a child at its center. It remained only a performance, carried in memory rather than ink, yet it planted a seed with real force. One summer afternoon turned improvisation into a beginning, and that beginning quietly waited for its next step. After the trip, the tale no longer lived only in a voice and a child's memory. It faced a simple test. Could it survive on the page? The request to write it down pushed Dodgson into a different kind of work. He began turning loose, spoken scenes into sentences that stayed put. Once words became ink, the story stopped changing every time it was told. He drafted the story as a manuscript and gave it a title that marked its first form, Alice's Adventures Underground. Writing forced choices. He had to decide what happened first, what could be cut, and how each strange moment connected to the next. The rhythm of performance disappeared, replaced by structure, and as he revised, the tale became less of a recollection and more of a designed narrative. Then he added drawings of his own. These illustrations did more than decorate the pages. They locked down how the characters and events could be imagined. The manuscript became a complete object, not a promise to tell the story again later. With every page he finished, the balance shifted. What had started as an improvised entertainment turned into a fixed text, ready to be handed over intact. By 1864, the manuscript stopped being a work in progress and became a finished thing. Dodgson completed his handwritten version of the tale with his own drawings set directly into the pages. That completion mattered. It meant the story no longer depended on memory or on his willingness to keep revising it. It had a fixed form, one version, one ending. A private story now had a permanent body. Then Dodgson did something that changed the meaning of everything he had written. He presented the completed book to Alice Liddell. Until that moment, the manuscript still functioned like an extension of their shared time and her request to see the story written down. Now it became a gift with a single owner. The tale gained a dedicated recipient, and with that, a clear personal origin that could not be separated from her name. That handover set a boundary. The book belonged to a particular child, and it marked the story as something made for her, not for an audience. At the same time, it also raised the stakes for Dodgson. A spoken adventure had turned into an artifact that could be kept, shown, and remembered long after the day it was invented. In 1864, the story became real in a new way, because it could now outlast them both. The handwritten book no longer stayed in one pair of hands. It passed quietly to other readers, and their reactions mattered. People laughed at the turns of logic and remembered the strange characters as if they were real. That response changed the stakes. If the story worked for more than one child, it could work for strangers too. Dodgson began to see the tale as something with a future beyond the Liddell family. So he went back to the text and started to expand it. The simple underground journey grew into a longer, more carefully shaped adventure. Episodes multiplied, pacing tightened, and the jokes became sharper because they had to survive a wider audience. This was not copying out a gift anymore. It became rewriting, testing, and improving. Each new page pushed the story away from a private keepsake and closer to a book meant to stand on its own. With that ambition came a practical question: could it be published? Dodgson moved from family circles into the world of printing and sales, where approval carried consequences and mistakes cost money. He looked for a path to bring the story to the public, and he treated it like a serious project rather than a personal souvenir. The goal shifted. The tale was no longer written mainly for one girl, but for readers he had never met. In 1865, the expanded story finally left the safety of private sharing and became a real printed book. It appeared under a new title, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And it carried a new kind of authority. It looked like something meant for strangers, not just friends. Publication changed the stakes. Once it entered the marketplace, the tale had to hold attention without the original storyteller present. A key part of that shift came from the pictures. The publisher brought in John Tenniel, an established illustrator, to create images that matched the book's strange logic and sharp humor. His drawings did more than decorate pages. They told readers how to imagine faces, bodies, and scale, locking certain moments into a shared form. For many, the illustrations became the story's visual truth. With text and images bound together, the book circulated beyond Oxford for the first time. It reached households that had no link to its original audience and no reason to treat it as a personal souvenir. It became something you could buy, borrow, and pass along. That commercial life mattered. It turned a one-off tale into a repeatable experience, and it put Wonderland on a path toward public recognition. The book did not just sell, it spread. People repeated its strange turns of phrase in ordinary conversation, as if everyone shared the same private joke. Readers began to treat the characters like public property, instantly recognizable even to those who had not finished the story. That was the real shift. The tale stopped feeling like a single printed object and started working like a shared language. With that shift came a new kind of attention for its author. The pen name on the cover became linked to the title so tightly that many people spoke of them as one thing. He was not merely the writer of a successful children's book. He became the man behind Alice. Strangers expected the story to explain him, and they expected him to explain the story. Fame changed the way the book was read. The public looked for clues about the author's life inside the nonsense, and every detail seemed to invite decoding. The characters and scenes felt less like a playful invention and more like a set of symbols with a hidden source. The story still entertained, but it also carried a new weight. It now arrived with a real person attached. By 1871, the first book already carried a life of its own, and expectations followed its author everywhere. He answered with a second journey, but he did not simply repeat what worked before. He released Through the Looking Glass, and the move mattered. It extended the child at the centre into a new adventure that felt connected, yet clearly separate. A sequel arrived, and it had to prove it deserved to exist. This time, the world operated on a different kind of logic. Instead of the earlier book's loose, tumbling surprises, the new story followed a stricter underlying pattern, like a game with rules that shaped every step. That structural change changed the experience for readers. It suggested the author was not trapped by one hit formula. He could rebuild the whole machine and still keep the same strange energy moving through it. The result was bigger than one more successful title. With two books now standing side by side, the public no longer treated the original as a one-time oddity. It became the first half of a matched pair. Readers compared, collected, and returned to both, seeing connections across them. That two-part shape gave the Alice stories staying power. They settled into culture as a lasting literary phenomenon, not a passing craze. In the decades after the books appeared, the story stopped belonging only to the page. Producers and performers saw a ready-made world that could be sold as an evening's entertainment. Stage versions arrived first, and they forced choices the book never had to make. Scenes had to fit time limits. Wordplay had to become actions. Songs and dances slipped in because theatres demanded them. Once the tale became a performance, it changed in a new way each time it was mounted. Different companies emphasized different parts: comedy, spectacle, or moral lesson. Designers invented looks that audiences started to treat as official, even when they disagreed with the illustrations readers already knew. The result mattered. A shared story turned into competing templates, and Wonderland started to multiply. Then screen versions pushed the change even further. Early film could not rely on long speeches, so it leaned on quick images, tricks, and bold physical business to make sense of the strange events. That shift made the story travel faster and reach larger crowds than theatres ever had. By the early 20th century, many people met Wonderland first as a show, not as a book. Over time, the book stopped being just a successful children's story and started acting like a shared reference point. New editions kept appearing. Translations carried it into classrooms and homes far from England. Each generation met it in a slightly different way and then passed it on again. The result felt simple, but it was huge. A private invention became a world object, recognized even by people who never read it cover to cover. That wide fame invited constant reshaping. Filmmakers turned its loose logic into images and music. Artists borrowed its strange shifts in size and identity to talk about modern life. Writers recycled its situations, sometimes as comedy, sometimes as satire, sometimes as dark fantasy. None of these versions needed to stay close to the original. The title alone signalled a certain kind of experience, and that gave adapters freedom while still sounding familiar. Scholars also pulled it apart, not to spoil the fun, but to explain its staying power. They studied its wordplay, its puzzles, its rules that broke and then remade themselves. The book started showing up in arguments about language, childhood, logic, and even power. And that was the sharpest contrast of all. A story once shaped for one child on one afternoon ended up carrying more meanings than any single author could have planned.